Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier session, we discussed about the concept of demand forecasting, what was the meaning of it, and why demand forecasting is very important for any organization in order to plan for its production, materials requirement and procurement, as well as we understood the scope of forecasting and what are the different types of forecasts, including macro level forecasts, industry level forecasts, firm level forecasts, etc. And on the basis of time period, how they can be classified, short term and long term forecasts. And another important terminology wise crucial distinction between different types of goods and demand, we have discussed that also, like what is the difference between producers goods and consumers goods, what is the difference between durable and non-durable goods. Same way, what is the difference between derived demand and autonomous demand, and industry demand and firms demand, short-term demand and long-term demand. Like this, different concepts in relation to the demand forecasting we have discussed in the earlier session. Now let us quickly go through some of the other aspects related to what are the factors affecting the demand for non-durable consumer goods, popularly also called as FMCG, fast moving consumer goods. Non-durable means which are generally useful for day-to-day life purposes, but they will not be lasting long in terms of their time period or life. So what are the factors which will affect the demand for such goods? These are the factors that will have an impact on. Anyway, you're not going to get any question like list down all the factors which will have an impact on the demand for non-durable goods. So they don't need to by heart these lists or anything like that. However, you should understand what are the factors which will impact the non-durable consumer goods demand from a conceptual point of view rather than a by hearting and reproducing in the examination point of view. So that is the difference we need to always observe in the process of learning. Normally earlier in the school days and +1 +2 days and going forward in CA foundation, that difference will be there. So here we need to just understand them, and of course the names definitely on a broader basis we need to know. So most important thing is the terms and what is the meaning of that. So what are we looking at here? What factors will influence the demand for non-durable consumer goods or fast-moving consumer goods? These are the factors generally which will have an impact. There will be hundreds of other factors. Once again, don't be under a wrong impression that 3 factors means that's all. These are the only 3 factors. Any other 4th factor I will not consider. No, not like that. These 3 factors are given here. So we are talking about them. If I give 30 more factors also, we can talk about them. But that will take more time. So the only point is we have to understand the limitations, the broader you can say the boundary within which we can discuss these things. So these are the things which are given. So let us just understand how these factors will have an impact on the demand for non-durable consumer goods. First factor is disposable income. So there is a difference here. Instead of using the word income, it has been used disposable income. So what is a disposable income and income? What is the difference there? Yes, there is difference. There is personal income definitely for different people whom we can call consumers. And from the personal incomes, if you deduct the personal taxes like income tax, what you get is called as disposable income. So there is a difference between the income and disposable income. Income means income that is earned, but the entire income that is earned cannot be spent. Why? Because out of this income, he has to pay certain taxes like income tax. So after deducting the personal taxes from the personal income, what is the remaining we get? That is called disposable income. That disposable income will have a huge impact on the demand for FMCG products. If the disposable income is high, naturally the demand for such products will be high. If the disposable income is low, demand for such products will be low. So one factor which will have an impact on the demand of the non-durable consumer goods is disposable income. That is one factor. Then another factor is price. Naturally, as we discussed earlier, price is always an important factor, particularly for these type of non-durable consumer goods. wherein if there is an increase in price, usually the demand or quantity demanded will reduce. If there is a decrease in price, then the demand or quantity demanded will increase. So in general, how the price of the same commodity and how the price of the related goods like substitutes and complements will have an impact on the demand of the original commodity we already discussed. The same thing applies to this non-durable consumer goods also. That is not an exception. Usually price and quantity demanded are inversely related with each other. The price of the substitute and the quantity demanded of the original commodity are positively related, whereas the price of the complementaries and complementary commodities and the demand for the original commodity are also inversely related. So there are three types of prices we are talking here. One, the price of the commodity itself. Two, prices of the substitutes. Three, the prices of complementary commodities. All these factors will have an impact on the demand for non-durable consumer goods. This one is nothing new. We already know that. Same way, even income also is nothing new. What is new here is the word disposable income. Normally we use the word income elasticity. That means definitely we already know income of individuals will have an impact on the demand. Yes, we know that. But here only just we are, instead of using the word income in general, we are calling it disposable income because this is more technically correct. Why? Because the entire income that is earned may not be actually be eligible for spending by the consumer because he will have a liability to pay personal taxes. So at a broader level, personal income minus personal taxes is equal to disposable incomes. So that can be like an equation you can understand and remember that. That is one factor. Price is another factor. Demographic data also will have an impact on the demand for this type of non-durable consumer goods. Demographic once again means what? Different types of age groups which are there in the society. So different classification of people in the form of age or in the form of gender. These are all called demographic distinctions. So let us say usually young people are more in the population means in general the demand for let us say clothing and all will be more. That's how naturally it will be. Let us say if the middle-aged group people are more, generally means the demand for automobiles might be a little bit more. Like that, if the more number of people in a society are children, then the baby products will have a more demand or educational related products will have more demand. Imagine some society is little aged society, lot of old people are there. Definitely then the demand for goods like spectacles and the goods like medical equipments will be more. So the age group of the different cross sections of the people. Of course, every society will have all the people. Don't think that there is a society where only young people will live or only old people will live. Nothing like that. There will be all categories of people in any society. But who is dominating? In the sense, who is in majority? Who has a more number? That will drive the demand for the non-durable consumer goods. So this is what in India we popularly call it demographic dividend. Demographic dividend, not democratic. Democracy is different, demography is different. Democracy is a political system, so let us not get into that. Demography is different. Demography is about the statistics related to age, gender, ethnicity sometimes of the people. All these things are called demographic data. Generally, age related data is demographic data. Like that, if more male are there than female, then certain types of goods will have more demand. If more female are there than the male, then some other types of goods will have more demand. So the non-durable consumer goods demand will depend upon the demographic classification of a society. That is also another factor which will have an impact on the demand for non-durable consumer goods. That is one more thing. So that is some of the aspects related to non-durable consumer goods. Now moving on to durable consumer goods. So let us look at the factors which are affecting the demand for durable consumer goods. So examples of non-durable consumer goods, say for example all the things that we use like toothpastes, soaps, shampoos, these are all non-durable consumer goods. They are not going to be lasting long. One soap I will use for 1 year or more than 1 year. Not going to happen like that. So these are like fast moving consumer goods. Sometimes they are called FMCG, or we can also call them non-durable consumer goods. That depends upon, their demand depends upon various things, on the basis of the disposable income, on the basis of price, and on the basis of demography. And there will be hundreds of other factors. Don't think these are the only three factors. These are the three major factors. Like these three factors affect the demand of any goods, they will affect the demand of non-durable consumer goods also. And there is nothing special that these factors will be affecting only this. We cannot jump to unnecessary conclusions from this. If we are saying these three factors are affecting the demand for non-durable consumer goods, it does not mean these three factors are affecting only the demand of non-durable consumer goods. These three factors can impact the demand of any kind of commodity. As a part of that, they will also have an impact on the demand of non-durable consumer goods. Like that, those are the factors related to them. Now, what about the durable goods? Durable goods generally means what? Something like, say, automobiles, something like, let us say, air conditioners or refrigerators, washing machines, electronic equipments. These are generally the durable consumer goods. Like mobile phones, most popularly nowadays, like laptops, personal computers. These are all durable consumer goods. So, what is the factors to be considered while understanding the demand for durable consumer goods? So, first of all, these type of goods have this special characteristic because a consumer can postpone the replacement of a durable consumer good. So usually for the non-durable consumer goods, usually the consumer is used to using them. Soaps and all, they will use every time. Once the one soap is finished, you will use another soap. Once one shampoo is finished, you will use another one. So like that, usually the usage of these non-durable consumer goods is recurring in nature. So customer generally cannot postpone much. He might change his choices, but he cannot postpone much the consumption of non-durable consumer goods. Whereas in the case of durable consumer goods, a consumer can postpone. So a lot of times it so happens that some, if the incomes of the people are not sufficient or they are not supportive, then simply what they will do, they will postpone the replacement of these durable goods. So they are not going to buy it immediately. In other words, the demand is going to be also postponed. That will reduce the demand. And again, the price, the factors are still the same. The price of a product increases, or the customer expectation is that the price of the product might decrease in future, or the income of the customers has decreased. In all these cases, the people will postpone their buying option. So on the basis of their affordability and intention once again in future, then they will buy these goods. Till that time, they will not buy these goods. They will postpone them. Of course, don't think all the people at the same time they will postpone. There will be people who will postpone. There will be people who will buy. That is how the demand is generated. But many people, if let us say most of the people are postponing, that is dangerous. That means a lot of people are not having sufficient disposable incomes, which can be used for the purchase of these type of commodities. That is not good for the industry. For example, something like automobile industry will be heavily affected by the decision of the consumers to postpone the purchase of such non-durable, such durable consumer goods like automobiles, for example. Not only just a new buying, replacement also will be postponed here. That is the main point. Because these durable consumer goods, at certain point of time, all the people will have. For example, said 15 years back, very few people have mobile phones and they started buying. A lot of people started buying the mobile phones. Now, if you just look at the situation in India, everybody has a mobile phone already. Then why should they buy one more? Because they would like to replace the existing phone with a new phone. So that replacement can be postponed for durable consumer goods based on various factors once again, depending upon the social status, prestige, level of money income, rate of obsolescence. Obsolescence is particularly about technology. Let us say once again, for example, you have a mobile phone with the 2G technology in that, and 2G is already outdated. The market is with 4G, 5G, 3G, and all these things. So naturally, the 2G phone that we have, we feel that it is not useful anymore. So naturally, we tend to replace that phone with maybe 3G or 4G or 5G type of phone, depending upon the income, of course. Level of income, of course, matters, always matters. But the rate of obsolescence also matters, particularly in the field of telecom technology related products. will have more impact of the obsolescence. So if at all a product is becoming obsolete very quickly, then the replacement also will be very quick. So when the technology is improving drastically, naturally there will be new phones, new type of not only phones, any other electronic product also, which the people will tend to buy without postponing, because their existing products are becoming outdated. They want a new model, or they want a new technology which they can utilize. So the new innovations will have an impact. Automatically, the new innovations will make the old products obsolete. In the sense, the rate of obsolescence will be more when the innovations are more. That will increase the demand for durable consumer goods. If there is no obsolescence, if the same product you can use for longer period of time, longer tenure, like for example, if you just imagine, since when you know television in your home, of course, definitely you are in a generation where you know that there is television at your home almost the moment you can understand the world. So the point is, it is not that the television has arrived at your home after you arrived. So the point is, whenever you have seen the television since the childhood, since you know that there is something called television, you know that there is television at your home. At least most of you would have definitely had this at home. But my point is, when was this replaced? How many times it was replaced in your whatever number of years of life so far? How many times it would have replaced, and how long it took to replace it? And some of us might not have replaced also. It would have been like just staying there since childhood. The television you know first time is the same television you are also having now. That means it was never replaced. And there are some other people, there might be so many replacements that happened in between. And what could be the reasons for those replacements, if you can think? Those are the same reasons for the demand of durable consumer goods. So these will be the general reasons. When the social status becomes better, when the person feels that he needs to have this kind of product, or when the incomes of the people are high, or the rate of obsolescence is high, then the postponement will not happen. Then usually the people will go for purchasing of durable consumer goods. That's what happens in general in relation to durable consumer goods. So that will depend upon many factors. So the point is, it is not that very frequently people replace the durable goods. They replace them, but not with that much frequency. If at all that frequency has to be increased, these factors should become better. Then only they will think about it. Otherwise, the goods will keep on be used for longer and longer period of time. So the rate of obsolescence also matters a lot. Usually, like refrigerators and all, obsolescence is not that much high. As far as I am concerned, the refrigerator I know first time in my childhood till now, there is no new technology that I could see. Okay, people say three flow technology, infinite, something names they'll give in the advertisements, but nothing else. Ultimately, the job of the refrigerator is the same. There is no much excellent, extraordinary addition that is happening to the refrigerating technology that I could not see. Yes, there is size difference. Maybe a little bit lesser size refrigerators were there earlier. Now there are 2 door, 3 door, big refrigerators are there. So size is not the point. So a refrigerator which is serving its purpose will not become obsolete. So that is why the replacement of the refrigerators will not be that fast. But if you look at other things like televisions, changed drastically. So earlier there used to be CRT televisions. Later LCD televisions came. So replacement was warranted, whether we did it or not. But that was definitely required, because completely altogether it's a different experience of viewing. There's a difference between a normal CRT television and LCD television. Plasma televisions came later. Then LED televisions came now. So like this, the technology improving means the old technology becomes obsolete. So the replacement of the durable goods happens on the basis of that also. So various factors will have an impact. So what factors will have an impact in the real life society will be a very dynamic thing rather than a static thing like what we are knowing at the points. These are all dynamic things. When they keep on changing, the demand for such products also keeps on changing. Like that, this one of the factors is, some of the factors we can say are these factors with which people will take a decision whether to postpone or not. That is the first point to note. Second point is, these goods require certain special facilities also actually. Okay, you have, let us say, fantastic 5G phone with you, But if the 5G telecommunication company is not there, what will you do with that 5G phone? Nothing, useless, no? So these devices and these type of things, whatever we have a fantastic Ferrari car, but what is the use of it? We have to still go through the same speed breakers and uh, same roads, same bad roads most of the times. So the point is, these all durable consumer goods in general require certain special facilities. More and more, the facilities are improving. For example, like roads or electricity for other products like refrigerators, etc. So if these infrastructural facilities are improving, naturally the demand for durable consumer goods also improves. Now again, if you just look at the difference between say 10, 15 years back, when less people were there on the roads with bikes and all, because the roads were much pathetic. People didn't have really the motivation to go for purchasing of an automobile. But little bit, definitely there has been an improvement in the infrastructure facilities. So naturally the demand for bikes and cars also has increased all these years. Same way, electricity also. Olden days, definitely, even you can remember in your childhood, lot of power cuts used to happen. That way, especially in summer, you can remember almost hours and hours of power cut used to happen or not. It is common. It used to be very common for every person in their life. So with that, what will be the motivation to buy or go for a fantastic product? Maybe there is a super product that is available. Let us say electricity fluctuation is so much that even it can beat our stabilizers and it is going to spoil our electronic devices. If that is the confidence we have on our electricity distribution, why would we go for it? But if we have the confidence that no, electricity will be supplied with a quality electricity and there will be no power cuts, there will be no much huge fluctuations which will damage our goods, which will damage our electronic equipments. If this is the confidence, then naturally people will buy durable consumer goods more confidently. So many factors will have impact on the demand for durable consumer goods, like some special facilities. Examples like this: you need good roads for automobiles, you need good electricity. Good means continuous electricity, quality electricity for any electronic products, by the way. So if these are available, then naturally, then only the durable consumer goods demand will increase. Same, we can apply it to the mobile phones. Imagine no telecom company is offering 5G network, but there are lots of 5G phones which are being sold. Who will buy? What is the use of buying a 5G phone when you don't have a 5G network? Useless, no? Necessarily, why would anybody want to spend more money on a network or on a facility on a mobile phone which doesn't support? Mobile is good, but the telecom network we have will not support it. So if without that, there is no point of selling those mobiles also. That is why very less people will go for such kind of products when the special facilities are not available. So these goods require special facilities. If they are there, their demand will be more. If those special facilities are not there, then their demand will be less. That is how generally these goods are having a behavior. Another thing is, these goods are generally used by more than one person. Again, all these things are generally, not that every time everybody will have the same characteristics. Exceptions will always be there. But in general, these goods are used by more than one person. So naturally, not just an individual decision. Usually, these goods will have an important family understanding also, and family characteristics also will have an important role to play in the demand for durable consumer goods. What kind of factors can have an impact? Like income of the family itself, the size of the family, age distribution of the family, and also the gender composition. All these things are going to have an impact on the demand for consumer durables. And on the basis of the change in the number of households, that also will be having an impact on the total market size of the durable goods. So definitely the number of one household increases means more goods are required. Just once again imagine there is a joint family of say 10 people that requires a big refrigerator. One refrigerator could be enough for all of them. Imagine this family has been split into four different families. They are all staying in different places. Now they require four refrigerators. So the quality of the family, the kind of the family characteristics have changed. The dynamics have changed. Earlier it was a big family which required one refrigerator, maybe one television. Now, because there are now four families, they require four refrigerators, four televisions, more number of air conditioners, more number of washing machines. So all the durable consumer goods have increased in their requirement. Earlier, maybe all of them, whoever was going to work, maybe all of them were going in one car. Now, because they're all staying in different places, they may need 4 cars. So what happened? Just when the joint family is split, automatically the demand for durable consumer goods also will increase. So the number of households will also have an impact on the demand for durable consumer goods. Like this, many factors will be there practically, which will influence them, but we are only just understanding at a broader level what could be the general important factors that can have an impact on the demand of durable and non-durable, also we have already seen, of the consumer goods. Another thing is the replacement, already as we are talking about just now. Replacement is a very important component in the total demand for durables, particularly because durables is not about just buying a new one. Buying a new car is, yes, that is one category of people who create a demand for that. Replacing an existing car is also a very important segment of the society which creates demand for that segment, like durable consumer goods. Same with television, same with mobile phones. First time purchasing mobile phone and using it for 20 years, then the mobile phone manufacturers are not interested in that. They want to sell more and more. And what they want is particularly, they want us, the customers, to buy the mobile phones as many times as possible. So we need to keep on replacing them, because always the demand for durable consumer goods, they want to increase naturally. So what happens here? Usually when there is a higher holding of the current holding of the durable goods, greater will be the replacement demand. So first time if you have mobile phone, then only you will replace. No, you never had mobile phone, where will you replace? So replacement comes later. First the reach should be there. Like first, everybody has bikes in this country, almost every family, barring a very below poverty line families. All the middle class and above middle class families definitely have at least an automobile, like a two-wheeler, four-wheeler in some cases. So already when you have it, then you think about replacement. If you don't have it, you think about buying. That may take long time. But once you have it, you may think about a replacement of it. Usually that happens quickly compared to the first time when you purchased it. So from no one to having something, it will take some time. It will take actually long time, because most of the times it is difficult to change the segment of a person that is in a society that it belongs to. It will take a definite long time. But once you are in the segment where you could afford a bike, then definitely you are in a segment who can afford a replacement of the bike also. So if not today, after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, that will be replaced. So you will just sell it the old bike, and you buy a new bike. Like this, the replacement demand will play a very crucial role in the demand for durable consumer goods. And not only that, as like any other products, they are also influenced by prices and also credit facilities available for purchasing them. So now that is the reason why you can see what is this low cost EMI, zero cost EMI, Bajaj Finance offering 0% interest. All these things are only why advertisements are all done like that. Because the credit facilities, if they are more, then naturally people will buy the durable consumer goods more. In general, particularly in the countries like India, durable consumer goods are all purchased on credit. Majorly, not now, even since decades, a lot of decades also, durable consumer goods, people always use it to buy on installment basis. They don't generally buy paying down payment full amount. Very less percentage of people will do that. Most of the people, when they buy the consumer durables, they will go for some kind of installment scheme, which will definitely have the impact on this demand. If the credit facilities are more, if the credit is available for the consumers more, then the demand for durable consumer goods will increase. If not, it will decrease. Interest rates also will have an impact. If the interest rates are high, then the demand for durable consumer goods will decrease. People will not have motivation to buy them, because they're going to think that they'll have a huge financial impact, because they have to pay a higher rate of interest for them. However, on the contrary, if the interest rates are low cost EMI, no cost EMI, 0% EMI, all these things are telling the consumers what? Boss, you can buy our good now. Take the product now. Take the mobile now. Pay later. Take the refrigerator now. Pay later. Take the television now. Pay later. So you don't need to pay 50,000, 60,000 at one shot. You pay something now. Some down payment you make now, and pay the remaining amount in installments at your convenience, which will suit most of the middle class segment of the society, who are the major consumers for the durable consumer goods. So that is where The credit facilities also will have usually a big impact on the demand for durable consumer goods. So like this, consumer goods have two categories as we already discussed. One is durable, one is non-durable. Of course, these factors will have impact on everything. Don't think that demography will not have an impact on the durable goods. Yes, that will have an impact on non-durable also, durable also. But in general, major factors that will have an impact on the non-durable consumer goods segment is these three things. One is disposable income, two is price, three is demography. And what are the other factors influencing the demand for durable consumer goods? We can say in addition to these things can be this on the basis of the rate of obsolescence, the technology development, the level of the money income, once again, the prestige level of the people, that will have an impact. Also, the special facilities availability will have an impact, and family characteristics will have an impact. Replacement demand will have an impact. Availability of credit facilities and lower or higher interest rates will have an impact on the demand for durable consumer goods. Once again, you don't need to by heart these points, you need to just understand the crux of them. You need to understand the essence of these points so that you should be able to identify the correct answer if any question is given on this topic. That is about factors affecting the demand for non-durable and durable consumer goods. Now let us move on to producers goods. Producer goods are also we can popularly call them as capital goods generally, because this demand for the producers goods is a derived demand. Why is that? Because when the demand for the consumer goods increases, then only the producers will need to produce more. When they need to produce more, then only they need more and more plant and machinery, more and more equipment, more and more furniture, or whatever the capital goods that they want. That will be depending upon the consumer demand also, demand for consumer goods also. So what we can call the demand for producers goods is a derived demand. And what is the other name for producers goods? We can also call them as capital goods. Of course, once again, don't again jump to conclusions. In fact, all the capital goods need not be producer goods, all the producer goods need not be capital goods. But in general, the producers goods are capital goods. For example, if there are chemicals, chemicals are not consumer goods, chemicals are producer goods only. But can we call chemicals as capital goods? No. No, that is not capital goods. So producers also will have capital goods. Producers also will have, capital goods in generally are non-durable, we can say. Our producers can also have durable goods also. Sorry, capital goods are durable. Non-durable goods like chemicals also can be used by them, like raw materials. So both they will use. So what we are talking about here in this case, we are talking about generally the durable goods, that is capital goods. If they are durable, those are capital goods. If they are non-durable, they are goods which are going to be consumed immediately. So here what are we talking about? For the consumer's point of view, we talked about both the types. Here it is given, so we are talking about it. We can talk about these things for 100 years also, not a problem. But the point is, it's not about the only factors affecting the demand of every category of goods. Whatever are given here, those we are discussing. So if the factors given here are related to the non-durable consumer goods, yes, we discuss about that. Durable consumer goods, yes, we discussed about that. Here, producers goods can also be two categories. No, producers goods also can be durable and non-durable. So particularly, what are we talking about here? We are talking about capital goods only. Capital goods means only durable. We are not generally talking about the non-durable goods. But of course, the producers goods demand is always a derived demand. It is always derived from the demand for consumer goods. If the consumers are asking for something, then only they will buy. If they are not asking for something, then the producers also need not manufacture. So when the producers are not manufacturing, what they will buy? Why they should buy something? They will not buy anything. So the capital goods industry or the producers goods industry depends upon the consumer goods industry. That is a point we have to also understand. Of course, not only that, it also depends upon the rate of profitability. That is also there. And also the size of the market particularly also will have an impact on the producers goods demand. Why? Because if the size of the market is big, then more and more industries will be interested to manufacture them and supply them. If the size of the market is very small, then there is no motivation for the producers to produce them. When they are not producing, they will not buy these machineries. Simply speaking, capital goods for example and understanding purposes, we can think about as machineries. Then only they will have a demand. Imagine there is a huge demand for construction industry, then only there will be demand for pockliners, right? Then only there will be demand for cranes and construction equipment. If there is no demand for houses, no demand for constructed buildings, then naturally the demand for pockliners, the demand for excavators, the demand for land drilling machines, the demand for cranes, all these things we can call building machineries, those will not have much of demand. Why? Because their demand is a derived demand on the basis of the demand for the housing or the construction sector. So like that, various factors will have an impact on the demand for capital goods, or we can call them producers goods also. Particular segment of the producers goods will be in general capital goods. Size of the market will have an impact, definitely yes. And not only that, the growth prospects of the user industries will have an impact, definitely yes. And what is the norms of consumption of the capital goods in general per unit of the installed capacity, that also matters. So normally installed capacity will be something we will not generally use 100% of the installed capacity. What is the general norms of consumption of the capital goods per unit of the installed capacity? Probably that also will have an impact on the demand for producers goods. Imagine, for example, let us say in a particular industry 90% efficiency or 90% utilization of capacity is a common norm, and we are already working at 95% utilization. Imagine, then already when we are crossing that norm, we definitely will think for no 95% is already crossing the general norm of this industry, so we will go for few new equipment, some more new equipment we might require, like that we will think. On the other side, already imagine if the percentage utilization is only 40%, 50%, then why should you buy new equipment? Should we buy new equipment when you are not able to use the existing capacity only? No point. That is why in those cases usually there will not be a demand for new equipments. Electricity is one of the classic examples for the current situation in India. In India currently the electricity is overproduced. It means the production supply is more, demand is less. In fact, the overall capacity utilization of the power sector in India has almost reached less than 50%. It's really pathetic actually, but that's reality, unfortunate reality. So means what? If at all, just for understanding purposes, not that really it will happen like this. If at all we are producing 100 units of output of electricity, how many units are being only purchased by the people, consumed by the people or industries? Only 50. Means we are not able to consume whatever we are producing. But what does it mean? It means the utilization also, if we have the capacity to produce 100 units, we are not producing 100 units. So that is how the electricity works. Electricity has again a unique characteristic. You cannot produce and keep it in the godown. If it is like, let us say, automobiles, cars, somebody produced more cars, people do not buy them. People are not interested to buy them. It's a problem, no doubt. There is a lot of pain in that for the producer, no doubt. But still, the good news there is, he can keep it in the godown. He can keep it in the showroom. It will be there. He is not losing that. But electricity is not like that. Electricity has to be produced also and distributed also, consumed also, all at the same time, without much time lag. So as whatever the electricity we are consuming now, it would have been produced and it would have been just distributed to us few seconds back, at the maximum few minutes back. So that is also too much. So means what? Whatever the consumption is there, that much only will be produced. So if the consumption is only 50% or capacity utilization is only 50% of the capacity overall possibility of producing, then why should the new electricity factories or new power factories should be coming? No point. There is no logic in installing a new capacity when you are not able to use the existing capacity. That is a practical problem that India is facing now, particularly in relation to the electricity. Like this, many examples can be taken for the demand of the capital goods. So now the demand for, let us say, new plant and equipment to start a power project is very less. But if you remember, or if you just observe, you cannot because you might be very small that time. So 10 years back, the demand for the power generation equipments was higher because a lot of new power plants were coming at that time. As a result of those plants which came up that time, now we have a lot of excess power which is generated but not yet consumed. So when it is a situation, then new power generating units will not be set up. That means new capital goods or equipment or plant will not be purchased for that industry, so that will have almost no demand, since already installed capacity is not yet utilized. Like this, many industries will have the same type of situation. So simply, if the capacity is already very much underutilized, then new capital goods demand will not be there. If the capacity is already overutilized, then definitely expansion will happen. The manufacturer would like to buy new equipment and start a new plant wherein he can install some new machineries. So that will increase the demand for capital goods or producers goods. That's what happens. Very, very crucial thing. Of course, there is one more factor on a practical basis, wherein the price of a substitutable factor of production also will have an impact on the consumption of or demand of capital goods. This can be classically understood from agriculture point of view in India. Let us say in India, there is a plenty of abundant of agriculture labor available, which is true. But if at all that becomes expensive, if the labor, agriculture labor in the rural India becomes expensive, which it has become since past 5 6 years earlier, it has become little expensive, and agriculture was not becoming feasible at that level of labor cost. So what slowly the farmers had to move from the labor to some mechanized things. So now you can see many areas, even in the small villages, you can see the tractors. Many of the tractors are there. All these harvesting machines particularly are working in almost full-fledged capacity. So the point is what? The use of such capital goods. So what is the nature of a harvesting machine? That's a machine. So that's a capital good. That's a producer's goods. And who is the producer here? The farmer is the producer. He is using that good to produce whatever we need in the form of food grains. So the producer's goods will have also being affected by the other costs of the factors of production. Say labor, for example, if the cost of labor increases, then the demand for the capital goods also increases. Why? Because that is a substitutable factor of production. Labor and tractor, for example, are substitutes. So labor and say harvesting machine are substitutes. If cost of labor is more, then the demand for harvesting machines will increase, because people don't want to recruit more people and pay them more money. Rather, they can quickly get their job done by using the machine in a very short period of time at a cheaper cost. If that is the case, then the demand for such capital goods will increase. If on the contrary, let us say labor is available so cheap, then there is no point in going for capital goods. Then usually people will go for utilization of more labor only. So simply speaking, if the labor cost is more, generally that particular country or economy will slowly become capital intensive. That's what it happens, because labor is costly. On the contrary, if the labor is cheap, then that becomes more labor intensive. That means there will be a decrease in the demand for capital when the labor becomes cheaper. So it depends upon not only the availability of capital goods and other factors of economy, also the factors of production, other types of factors of production like labor. If they are becoming cheaper, then naturally the producers will shift to that utilization. If the other factors of production are becoming costly, then they will shift to the usage of more capital goods, more machineries. So that is another important factor which will affect the demand for producers goods. Like this, many factors will be there. These are all once again a generic understanding of many aspects that might happen in the real life. That's all. Not that they will happen like this only exactly. There will be hundreds and hundreds of other factors. Lot of things are given here already as comma, 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 like that. For example, profit making prospects are more, then capital goods demand will be more. Let us say on that basis only there will be an inducement to demand for capital goods. For example, if their firms are optimistic about selling at a higher output, then they will have higher incentive for investing for the capital goods, like that. Advances in technology, will they have an impact? Yes, because when there is a new technology, then definitely the new technology has to be implemented, and definitely demand for capital goods also will increase. Lot of these things, all of these things might have a positive impact on the investment in capital goods. Usually in a society, though it is not directly related to the microeconomic things, because the topic is there and we talked about consumers and producers both, we can understand the overall process in a society, how the things work like this. So earlier we just had a generic discussion on that, so same thing can be continued. For example, when there are people who are we are the people, the common persons who individuals, households, you can call them. So the individuals and households, what they will have, they will work basically for somebody or self-employment. Only two options. Somebody either will work or somebody will have self-employment. Those who are able to work, we are talking about. Children and old people in the society may not be able to work, so let us not consider them. Those who are in the active age of the society, who can work, who are supposed to work, if they are having work, if the unemployment is not that much, then they will get incomes by doing some work, whether by way of employment or self-employment. From that incomes, if they have to pay some taxes, particularly the direct taxes, that is income tax, etc. So after taxes, whatever they get, we can call that as disposable income. Disposable income. So this is what we can call that as personal income. So the personal incomes minus taxes gives us disposable income. So when there is a disposable income, entire income they will not spend. They will spend only a portion of that. So there is personal incomes, then there is taxes, then there is disposable income. So this disposable income, they will not spend some portion of that will be spent. So they will spend it. So if they spend it, that can be again spent on two types of goods. We know that one is durable consumer goods and non-durable consumer goods. Both of them will definitely have impact on the demand for them. So this is what people do. Durable, non-durable consumer goods, who will consume? Consumers only. Means individuals and households. So who will have these personal incomes we are talking about here? Individuals and households will have that. When they have households, means one family type. So individuals and households will get personal incomes, so pay taxes. Whatever the remaining is, what is their income which can be spent by them, they have the capacity to spend that much income only, and out of that they will spend some income. But out of that spending, after that, some people, not all of the people in society will have this facility. Most of the people will spend the entire income, but some people in the society will have lesser spending than disposable income. So disposable income minus whatever is spent, what you can call that? So that is called saving. You can save that. So this saving, ultimately, the saving happens where can you save? You can just keep it in the cupboard. Then that is of no use. That is not going to have any productive impact on the economy. But if this saving is happening in the banks, if this saving is happening in any of the financial institutions, finance companies, non-banking finance corporations, like that, anywhere if these are saved, or even in the capital markets like buying shares, mutual funds, etc., if this saving is done in the financial market, let us call it, on a broader basis, if that financial market gets this saving, that will be converted to investment, and this will be given, this saving, just for understanding purposes, let us say we saved in a bank. All the saving that people have saved in the bank in India, just only the deposits of the people in India has crossed more than 1 crores of rupees. It is now almost 120 lakh crores of rupees. That is the savings of the people in India. So but banks will not just sleep on them. What they will do? They will give loans to the people. Once again, some of them to the households and individuals, some of them to industries, the producers. So what the producers will do? They will do investment in capital goods. That's what they do. So all these factors will have an impact. If the incomes are high, disposable income is high. Disposable income is high, spending will be high. But still, because of higher incomes, people will still have the facility of saving a little bit more. When there is saving, then only there is a possibility of investment. When there is investment, then only there is a possibility of investment in capital goods. When there is investment in capital goods, then only once again employment is generated. So once employment is generated, once again incomes are high. This is a cycle. This is not going to be just one way. Economics is always a cycle. It's a circle. So if one thing is affected badly, all other things also might be affected badly. If everything is working fine, these things will go well. Like this, many factors definitely will have an impact on the demand of different types of goods. The factors that will have an impact on the non-durable consumer goods are these things. The factors that will have an impact on durable consumer goods are these things. And the factors that will have an impact on producers' goods are these things in general. These are the theoretical and conceptual things, once again, that we should be generally aware of. Now, there is one more discussion. Definitely it is there, but once again we cannot apply these things since we do not have the ability. First point. Second point, it is not required also, since it is not expected of us to use the methods of demand forecasting. We don't need to use them, but we just have to know that there are certain methods of demand forecasting. So now we know that demand forecasting is important. You need to forecast the sales of a particular organization of a particular product for the upcoming period. Yes, that is all good. We need to do the demand forecasting, and various factors will be impacting the demand. We know that. That is all known to us. But the point is how to do demand forecasting. How to do demand forecasting, we are not going to do. Definitely we are not going to do. But at least we know how others do. Those who do, how do they do? They do in different techniques. They use a lot of techniques. So definitely there are many scientific formulae. There are a lot of judgment. So this is not just a simple task. Don't think it is a children's game. Demand forecasting is a very huge task, very huge, you can say, assignment for any consultant also, because it requires a lot of scientific things, at the same time a lot of judgmental things also, so that there will be a better prediction for the future demand of a product. So what could be the general methods of demand forecasting? You can generally go through them, and you can just go through these things in detail later. But what are the basic methods? You can on a general basis understand these things. Let us say the survey. Survey means taking a report feedback from the customers. Sometimes you would have seen some of the people are waiting in the shopping malls and they are asking you to fill the form and some data. You will get a prize and all that. Prize is a secondary story. That is the story only to attract you to fill the form, attract you to survey your intention about something. So they will ask, do you have a two-wheeler? Do you have a four-wheeler? What is your family income approximately? So many things. So many things, they will collect the data. All this data will be pulled up at a higher level, and then they can identify potential customers from that. So usually it is a direct interview of potential customers. That's what we can call survey of the buyer's intentions. But again, question comes. So let us say a country like India having 130 crores of population, can 130 crores be interviewed? Is it possible? It is generally not possible. So compute enumeration method is not possible. Very rare that happens. Sample survey method is generally used, where not all the people are interviewed. At least some small sample of the potential consumers is selected, and that is only introduced. That is only interviewed. Interviewed means here asking some questions to them and getting some answers from them. What is their intention? Are they going to buy this product? Do they really have any interest in this product or not? Like that. Some kind of survey which will be conducted by thousands and thousands of people, marketing people, who will collect this data, and compilation of all this data happens at a very higher level by the consultants. Again, it's a huge task. It is not a small thing. We cannot do that. We don't need to do that. All that we are trying to do is understand, yes, there is something called a survey method, using which the intentions of the buyers are captured either by direct interview of the potential customers, of all the people who are possibly the customers for us in future, or only for some of the people taking a sample, or only the end use method. In other words, only we will have the final identification of final users. So we will not just throw it for everybody. The complete enumeration means everybody will be deemed to be a final consumer. For certain products, this may be true. Complete enumeration method can be applied. For certain products, there will be many people. For example, say toothpaste, a new toothpaste we want to introduce. There will be so many people. No? Everybody almost uses that. So there may be bigger sample size required, and a lot of people can be interviewed there. End use means final users is not limited here. Many people are there. But end use method can be used particularly demand for inputs, particularly where we have a capital goods once again, or we can even say the producers goods. There end use method can be used. How it is possible? Because we can identify all the final users, and on that basis we can forecast the demand. In other words, various other technical norms will be set, they will be fixed, and on the basis of the targeted levels of output, they will be having a overall estimation of the demand for such products. And of course, after everything is done, all those survey reports will be aggregated. So end use method generally can be used for producers goods, like something like chemicals once again, which are used within the producers. So in that case, how much of the demand for a chemical will be there can be understood directly by going to the end users. For finally reaching to consumers, it is difficult. There will be crores of people. If you want to reach only to the producers, there will be very less number of people. No? So use directly go to them and get the interview and get the data from them, and aggregate all of that. Aggregate means total. Then you get the demand for such product on the basis of their feedback. Like this, the buyer's intentions can be surveyed. That is one of the methods of estimating the demand, or we can call it forecasting the demand. Another method is collective opinion method. Usually it is also called as sales force opinion method, or sometimes also called as grassroots approach. Here some firms, like for example the medical representatives will be there. Lots of medical representatives will be there for pharma companies. Like you would have seen another company in India particularly, which has been mostly dependent upon sales personnel, like Eureka Forbes. Eureka Forbes completely dependent mostly on the sales personnel. So they will have the real knowledge, experience, and skills, because they know the ground reality. That is why it is called grassroots approach. It is not that some IIM MBA candidate is sitting in the AC room and deciding how much will be the sales forecast. It is the people who are on the ground, who are the real customer interaction. They can understand well the market, and they can forecast the future demand, and all these things will be aggregated at a higher level. So there will be thousands and thousands of salespeople throughout the country. Each of them will give their own opinion about how much could be the demand for next year, because they know that this year they only sold these goods. If at all, let us say this year they could sell 1,000 products, they know very well next year how much they can sell at the maximum. So is the customer response good, bad, whether the sales are going to increase or decrease? Who knows that? Who knows that is definitely the salesperson, because they are the one who have the most intimate feel of the reaction of the customers. So the people sitting in the top level, marketing directors, the IIM, MBA people, those people will know, but only from a theoretical perspective. The live interaction with the actual consumers will be generally with whom? That is the sales force. That is why collective opinion method is a very popular method, particularly for those companies which have a huge staff in their sales team. From them, the feedback will be taken. According to that, estimates will be made, and all the decisions, whether it is selling price changes, product designs, advertisement programs, and expected change in the competition and other forces like purchasing power, income distribution, etc., all these things can be understood from the experience and opinion of the huge network of sales force that is appointed by a company. So that method, that is why it is called as a sales force method or collective opinion method. That is one type of method. That is also a one type of method. And don't think that once again some people might be thinking, oh, we have to choose only one of them. We are not the ones to choose. First of all, it is organizations which have to choose. And whenever an organization really wants to do this demand forecasting, usually it will choose all the methods, and it will choose at least some methods which will suit it. Which one is better, which one is not better, that is none of our business. That whatever suits, that is better. It is like asking for somebody what is better, rice or wheat. If you like rice, you eat rice. You like wheat, you eat wheat. So what is better, what is not better is different story. So depending upon the situation, depending upon the requirement, depending upon the tastes and preferences of the people do that. Same way, the selection of methods also will depend upon the very many factors. What is the type of the product? What is the nature of the product? What is the nature of the market? What is the size of the market? And what is the real availability of resources to really employ them? Easy to say survey of buyer intentions. Can we do that really? It's very difficult task. Do we have sufficient resources to do this? Accordingly, they will be selected. Imagine if we don't have our own sales force, then you better appoint a marketing agency which can do this survey of the buyer's intention. Or you appoint a marketing agency which will get the direct interaction with the customers, and it will be able to tell the organization how the sales could be in the coming future. So like this, whichever technique is practical, that will be applied. There is nothing called good technique, bad technique, great technique, fantastic technique. Yes, there will be positives and negatives for any technique. Definitely, there will be. But which is suitable for an organization, that is a choice of organizations naturally. So we don't need to worry about which is good, which is bad, which is worse and all that. We are not here to judge that. Our job is not to judge. Let us be once again very clear. A student's job is not to judge. The student's job is to learn. These are the things which are all there that are happening outside in the real world. We are knowing that they are happening. Not that we are doing them. We are not in a position to do them. We don't need to do that also because it is not our field. We are not going to enter into marketing field. Our field is accounting field. So mostly we are not going to have any kind of direct interaction with any of these things in future also, not only now. But right now, what is our job? To know that yes, there are so many methods which are applied, and these methods are all effective in forecasting the demand, and they have to be applied scientifically. Just like that, forecasting of demand does not mean sitting in the AC room and seriously looking at the roof and okay, next year how much could be the sales, have a dream on that and then write it on the paper or enter into the computer. No, that is not demand forecasting. That requires a lot of scientific inputs. Like what? Like you get a survey done about the buyer's intentions, or if you have a very good sales force, take collective opinion from them. If not, there is another way of doing it, that is expert opinion method. So this is also called as sometimes the Delphi technique. It is one of the expert opinion method. So what happens here is, instead of having thousands of sales force, we'll have certain professional market experts and consultants who have specialized knowledge about the market. They will be sitting together and they will make reliable estimates. So here difference is not that much. Collective opinion method is about so many people, small sales force people who are on the grassroots level. They will they will contribute to the demand forecasting in a bigger way in that method. Expert opinion method, there will not be thousands of them. There will be few of them, 3-4 people, let us say. We will appoint them as consultants. And what they will do, they will brainstorm. They will think about it. They will identify what factors are there which are going to influence the demand of this product. Accordingly, they will be asked to provide the forecasts and reasons for their forecasts. So experts will be doing their job because they are experts and they are already well aware of this market. They will give their feedback about how much demand a product could have in future. So their opinions are going to be exchanged once again. There will be a lot of brainstorming, in the sense meetings, discussion. They have to prove how they are going to come out with this forecast. There is a point here is, this is also not that we are giving the experts a free hand to have dreams. No, they should also have some structured tools. Definitely yes, they also will have some scientific tools to collect the data, and again opinion, whatever they are framing is on the basis of that data which is collected. So that opinion is not a biased opinion, it is an unbiased opinion. The subjectivity a little bit will be there, but that should not be much. There should be ideally more objectivity, more facts, and according to the more information what they get from the market, they will be able to analyze that information and give us a final number which tells us, okay, this is going to be the forecasted demand for a particular product. So that is called as expert opinion method. This method is different from collective opinion method. Collective opinion method is given, collective opinion is given by low level people, that is sales, basically the sales people, the salesmen, we can say. Those are the ones who will give it. Here the expert means these are all top people. These are all mostly IIM, MBA type of people, experts who are consultants, who have understood the market and all that. So those people will have more role here in expert opinion method. And in addition to this, a lot of statistical methods can be used. Again, don't worry, don't need to do this. You only need to know this. So like trend projection method, many methods are there. So many techniques are there. Some of them you have in mathematics, but again, At the foundation level, you only have separately these things. Don't need to mix economics with mathematics here. That is not required. If we try to do that, we are complicating ourselves. And when it is not required, also we want to do, that is basically not a intelligent idea. So that doesn't work and not required. So the point is, statistical methods are used definitely. Yes, trend projection method, time series methods are used, graphical methods are used, methods of least square. These are all names. You don't need to know what are all those things. You know them anyway in the mathematics, not here. But don't try to apply that here, because there is nothing to apply. Here we cannot apply at this level. And again, don't be too enthusiastic about applying it in the foundation level. We will apply, don't worry at all. Statistical methods, when we say we will apply, this is our area. See, this area is not ours. You cannot go out into the shopping malls and survey the buyer's intentions. That is none of our business. There will be a lot of people who will be doing that job. Collective opinion method is not our business. That is all salesmen people. Again, low level clerical job. Expert opinion method, yes, at least our level, but our level means chartered accountants level, not students level. At that level, professional level, yes, it is. But once again, is a chartered accountant going to be involved in this? Generally, no, because this is more of a marketing people who will be more involved in that. But at least, if at all there is a possibility, this is where we might have some bit of application on the reality or the real ground. So, like using some statistical techniques for demand forecasting can happen, might happen for some of the people who are working in the industry. So if at all out of all this, if there is any one thing that can have a practical implication in future, that is this. Forget about real life. I want only about course. Yes, in the course also there will be application of these statistical methods, but fortunately not now. Those will be happening in final level. So in CA final, there is once again the statistical methods application in different ways, and some of them are these things, like the graphical method or the method of least squares, like this. How to use them and all, we don't need to know that. If you read this also, you will not understand generally anything. You just know the names, I would suggest. So statistical methods are there for demand forecasting. What are those? Like trend projection method using time series technique. Time series technique also can use two different methods, graphical method or method of least squares. That's it. That is enough. For this, so far, that is enough. Like this, regression analysis is also useful. You have regression analysis, by the way. Correlation, regression and all you have at foundation. But are you using them for economics? No. You only use, you know the technique only here. Application of that technique will not be done at this level. Later, at final level, that can be done. So we don't need to worry about application of these statistical techniques. So all that we need to know is there are statistical methods also which are very useful for demand forecasting. So if at all you are learning the statistics as part of the quantitative aptitude or quantitative methods in the foundation, don't think that you are learning it only for fun. No, you are learning it because it is useful for many things in future. We are learning ABCD separately. We are learning all the alphabets and everything separately. While learning alphabets, do you know where are they going to be used? Definitely you had no idea. Imagine your LKG days when you started learning ABCD. You blindly learned ABCD. You don't know why ABCDs are required also. But once you understood you have to form words from them, then I understood, okay, without ABCDs I cannot form the words. Okay, once you have the words, without words you cannot frame sentences, then you understood later. Without sentences you cannot write paragraphs, then you understood later. So while learning ABCDs, if I want to know how to write paragraphs, how can I write a story, how can I become a film writer, now itself we are learning ABCDs, and these things we are all talking about are big things. So understand that limitation once again. These are basic things that we are learning on a broader basis, only about the techniques. There are techniques. What are those techniques? Buyer's intentions can be surveyed. Salesman opinion, all of them collectively can be taken. Experts' opinions can be taken. Different statistical methods can be used. That's all. Are we going to use them? No way. That is not possible at this level, and mostly it is not possible at next levels also, except statistical techniques. So don't try to mix the unnecessary things here. Just understand that yes, there are techniques. These are the names of those techniques. Enough. That is our limited scope within which we have to understand and use that knowledge, limited knowledge, for answering the questions. That's it. That is one more type of technique, that is statistical technique. Similarly, controlled experiments can be taken. Sometimes it is called as market experiment method. Sometimes even practically it is called as a simulation. Simulation is also another technique. Taking an experiment in a controlled way. In other words, if you take a particular sample, you take for example, like a pilot project, you will do it, and then you will do various changes. For example, you change the pricing, you change the advertising, etc., and all the factors remain constant, and do this experiment, change the price and see how the demand is behaving, change the advertisement expenditure and see how the advertisement expenditure is impacting the demand. So this can be done by trying on the different markets at the same time, or different time periods also in the same market. Like this, controlled experiments can be done. So popularly this is called as pilot projects. You would have heard this also sometimes in the newspapers. Say a new proposal is on a trial basis going to be implemented only in this region. For example, just for understanding, when we have this petrol diesel prices to be linked with the international prices on a daily basis. Now we have, everybody has it, but did we have it directly, silently and straight away one day? Entire country has it? No. There were places where this was experimented. Like for example, in Vizag it was experimented. It is one area where this petrol diesel prices were changed according to the international markets for some period of time, 3-4 months, like that. And like this, there are other 4-5 places in India where this was experimented. So that is a controlled experiment. Only in a particular market that policy will be implemented, and what is the response will be tested. What response the market will give. Accordingly, if that is positive, if that is good, then the experiment can be extended to other markets. If not, then they will drop out that experiment. Like this. These are called controlled experiments. So market studies and experiments can be done in different markets at the same time, or in the same market at different times. So you do an experiment this year, flopped. Okay, wait for 2 more years and do another experiment. Maybe it will become a hit. If that is becoming a success, then you can extend it to other markets also. Like this, many experiments can be conducted in the markets. That is called controlled experiments method. Sometimes we can call them as controlled laboratory experiments. Laboratory is not about chemical laboratory, it is a market we're talking. Consumer clinics, various names we can give for that. And same way, there are other things like barometric method of forecasting. Barometric here means which we may not give the exact changes or exact behavior, exact numbers may not be given, but what they can definitely give is a trend. What they can definitely give is what is going to happen. So these things we have it in the last chapter. Once again, we will come to them, but general names you have to remember. See, when you look at some indicators, economic indicators in the market, they will tell us something about the present, past and future. Certain indicators are leading indicators, certain indicators are coincidental indicators, and certain indicators are lagging indicators. For understanding purposes, like a train, for example, if you see, when you hear the sound of the train, when it is coming towards the platform, that is a leading indicator for you that the train is about to come. So you have the indicator already. And coincidental indicator means the train is going or traveling, crossing the platform. Lagging indicator means the train has already gone. When you are looking at the train, already the train is gone, and you can see the guard compartment, that is a lagging indicator. So you see the engine, that is a leading indicator. You see the train itself, the bogies, that is a coincidental indicator. You see the guard's bogie, that means it is a lagging indicator. But at a point of time, whatever you see will give you an idea. What idea it will give you? Imagine if you see an engine, that will give you an idea that yes, the engine is coming. Probably, definitely, there is a train also that is following it. So it is giving a future input to you in advance. Coincidental indicator anyway is not a problem because it's already there in front of you, which is a fact. You don't need to predict that. It is there in front of you. Lagging indicators tell you that already train came and went. It is not talking about future, it is talking about the fact that it happened already. So all these economic indicators will be studied, and all these economic indicators will give us an idea about how the future could be, and all these indicators will tell whether there will be any changes in the market demand for a particular product according to these indicators or not. So various things. This is actually a macro approach, but we just need to know that these are barometric methods. Mostly these are all macro level things. Macroeconomic outlook will have a huge impact on these barometric methods. For example, the rate of unemployment and all these things will have an impact on the demand also. So looking at the macro and barometric numbers, macroeconomic indicators, also demand forecasting can be done. So these are various techniques. Of course, as I said, it is not that these techniques are mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive means if you use one, you cannot use the other one. Not like that. No, they are not mutually exclusive. You can use all of them also if there is a possibility. If you can use a combination of them also if there is a possibility. You means not you. Once again, the producers, the manufacturers, the big business houses which wants to forecast the demand, they can use any of these methods, taking directly the feedback from the buyers, or taking the feedback from the sales force, or by taking a feedback from experts, or applying certain statistical techniques like time series, correlation, regression analysis, a method of least squares, etc., or by doing some controlled experiments in one particular place or one particular period of time. Like this, various techniques can be used. And macroeconomic indicators also will give us an idea about how the demand could be possibly in future. These are the various aspects of theory of demand and the elasticity of demand. Most importantly, that is elasticity of demand, that is core area in this chapter, and the demand forecasting as a general understanding of some techniques, importance, and what kinds of demand, what possible types of demand are all there for different products. We have discussed all these things. With that, we can conclude this unit 1 of chapter 2, which is the theory of demand. And in the next session, we will discuss further about the MCQs related to this topic. And not only that, we can also continue the discussion on the supply as well as the consumer behavior in the upcoming sessions. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.